All right, Mark Rogers TV back with you for the rest of the second round as we start with pick 49. We're joined by, of course, our NFL draft expert analyst guru, Brent Carlstrom. All right, let's start with pick 49, Brent, and we've got the Jets needing some offensive weapons, and they get one here with Texas Tech's Jace Amaro.
Most folks were thinking the Jets were going to go wide receiver here, but with Amaro, they really get the tight end who's kind of not really a tight end, not really a receiver, sort of that, H-back, maybe halfway out on the line kind of a guy. He had so many catches at Texas Tech, so I think it's a good pick because I think you kill two birds with one stone with that pick.
All right, at 50, we've got the San Diego Chargers. They snuck into the NFL playoffs last season for the first time in a while. Jeremiah Attaouchu is how you pronounce his name because I've got a Georgia Tech blogger here on Mark Rogers TV that we contact on a regular basis. Attaouchu out of Georgia Tech, outside linebacker who racked up impressive tackles for loss and sack statistics for the Yellow Jackets.
I'm not usually a fan of trying to project these defensive ends who go to the outside linebacker position in the NFL. However, Jeremiah Attaouchu,
bless you,
is one of the guys I really, really liked a lot. I like Georgia Tech defensive players in general as a cliche, but I thought he has nice pass rush moves and possibly could drop into coverage. So as an edge rusher, I liked him.
Do you really want me to challenge you in naming somebody other than Calvin Johnson who has succeeded from Georgia Tech? Pat Swilling, a long, long time ago.
Very nice.
All right, we'll go to the next pick. We're at pick 51 with the Chicago Bears, those hated Chicago Bears, taking Ego Ferguson from LSU. Now, Ego Ferguson is a player who was behind a couple guys, most notably Sam Montgomery at defensive tackle for LSU, and was kind of in that second wave of players because, of course, most of the big-time programs now come at you in waves at those tackle positions and along the defensive front across the board. And so he was one of those guys that just kind of played like 30% of the snaps until this past season or season and a half for LSU. He's a sizable guy. He's got talent. What can you say? LSU recruits with just about everybody in the country. Ego Ferguson, I expect to be a pretty productive player in the NFL, a guy that is very serviceable.
I'll leave it to a guy with a bigger ego than mine to describe Ego Ferguson. We'll move on to the next pick.
Yes, well, you really put me in my place. I was just not prepared for that one, so I will move on and do the business at hand. Pick 52, Arizona Cardinals. Troy Niklas out of Notre Dame, and if I recall, going back to our video prep and our preview of the NFL draft at the tight end position, not a big fan, Mr. Carlstrom, of Troy Niklas out of Notre Dame.
You're right. If you remember our discussion previously, he was kind of in my overrated list for the tight ends. Having played behind a long line of decent tight ends at Notre Dame, he really only played 1 year as a featured guy. He does have the bloodlines. He is of the Matthews ilk, of that bloodline. And if you're looking for a more traditional tight end, a guy who can do inline blocking when you need it and do it well as catch the ball, Niklas is a guy you're going to like. So kind of a throwback to the days that you and I remember as kids growing up watching the tight end.
All right, on to our second round, 53rd overall pick, the Green Bay Packers. Make the selection, and I would have loved to have had a camera in your living room to see your reaction because this is not a guy that I believe that you wanted to see come to the Packer green and gold. Well,
look, there were crickets chirping in my living room. Not many high fives. It's a deep draft for wide receiver. I probably would have waited for the third round to pick a wide receiver, particularly with a team like Green Bay that runs a 3-4 defense that needs a nose tackle because B.J. Raji's on a 1-year prove-it-to-me contract, and they're going to move him back to the nose. With a guy like Louis Nix still there on the board, I'm surprised that they didn't go there, or just defense in general, a linebacker. But wide receiver is a bigger need in Green Bay than you might give credit for, because not only did they lose Greg Jennings last year, not only did they lose James Jones this year, but both of their stars going into the 2014 season, Randall Cobb and Jordy Nelson, are free agents to be at the end of this season. So wide receiver is certainly an important spot for Green Bay, and I really hate to argue with Ted Thompson's ability to find wide receivers in the second and the third round. So I'm just going to trust in Ted on this one.
And that's what we sometimes miss in analyzing positional depth, is looking ahead to the contract situation of some of these players that could create a gap all of a sudden out of a position that was once a strength just a year or two ago. All right, DeVonta Adams, though, we would say certainly if he's able to duplicate his statistics from Fresno State to the NFL, he's pushing Jerry Rice for all-time status. 131 catches and 24 touchdowns last year.
Right. And you know, and there'll be a lot of balls to go around in Green Bay, so he's at the right place. And he is sort of that, you know, classic possession receiver guy, and he'll be replacing James Jones, possession receiver. So it does make sense. There are other guys I liked a little bit better, but again, I'm not going to cast any dispersions, throw any stones. We'll see how it plays out.
Based on recent draft trends, Brent, and based on the first 53 picks in this draft, I was thinking that we were going to come to a place maybe in 2 or 3 years in the NFL where there would be no running backs. We would just go to a shotgun formation, no running backs in the NFL, none, just shotgun formation every down and arena football constantly in the NFL. But we finally get a running back selected. It's not the guy that I thought it was going to be, Carlos Hyde, or even Trey Mason or Jeremy Hill. I would have bet one of those three would have been the first one off the board, but it's Bishop Sankey of Washington.
Well, and you make a good point about the running back position. If you remember last year, it was the first year in, 50 years that a running back did not go in the first round of the NFL draft. Now we have 2 years running, and I thought we were going to have a year this year where one wasn't taken in the first 2 rounds.
I believe it's 3.
Possible. So I think the reason that Sankey went above the guys that you named, and you're right, I'm with you. I would have thought those other guys would have been picked earlier. I think that Tennessee sort of use him as maybe more of a factor in the passing game, and that's probably why they maybe edged him ahead of the others.
Yeah, I don't see the Huskies play a whole lot, but saw a lot of tape on him just in the last few weeks, and yes, he catches the football very well, soft hands, which isn't that common. It's not that rare either, but it's not a given for a collegiate running back to come out and be a refined pass catcher out of the backfield. All right, Cincinnati Bengals, AFC North power suddenly here in the last few years. Pretty much a legitimate playoff team at this position. And the running back run begins with Jeremy Hill following up the Sankey pick from LSU. And Jeremy Hill, guy that's had some off-field issues, but on the field is a workhorse.
What I really like about Hill is a lot of what I saw in Eddie Lacy from last year. He has great field vision out there. He can make a cut decisively, plant that foot, and move where he sees the opening. That is something you can't teach. That's instinctive. And so I was higher on Hill than perhaps some otherwise were.
LSU with one of the more explosive offenses in college football, which is kind of strange for me to say because they had a pedestrian offense for the last few years. Then with Mettenberger coming of age and the 2 wide receivers, Landry and Beckham, Hill in the backfield, they were explosive at a big-time level. Not the Fresno State with playing those kind of defenses, playing SEC defenses, explosive. Well, the situation with Hill is they lost their starting quarterback Mettenberger in the season finale against Arkansas. He did not play the bowl game against a very tough Iowa front seven. Jeremy Hill had to pick up the slack, gained over 200 yards in that bowl game, and without him, Iowa wins over LSU in that bowl game. All right, let's go to 56 and Denver with them taking a guy that you touched upon in our wide receiver preview, Cody Latimer out of Indiana.
Yeah, he kind of exploded on the scene late in the draft evaluation process. Mark, if there's ever a guy that the combine and the pro days really helped boost his stock, it would be Cody Latimer. he came in at that big size everybody was looking for, 6'2 and a half and 215 pounds, but with that size still ran a 4.40. And that's what got people going back to the tapes when they saw those numbers. And they liked what they saw because he did have one super good season at a lesser program in Indiana with 72 catches, over 1,000 yards last year, and a decent 2012 campaign as well. So the film was there to match the measurables.
In recent years, they've collected very good running backs in San Francisco. Frank Gore has been running forever. He's going to wear out at some point. Marcus Lattimore, unfortunately, doesn't look like he's going to be able to maintain a lengthy NFL career after 2 major surgeries in college. And the Niners go with Carlos Hyde. So Hyde, the Ohio State running back, who many projected as the best back in the NFL, just a couple slots behind Sankey, finally gets chosen by the Niners.
Well, yeah, you said it. He is that big back. And San Francisco likes to pound their opponents both defensively and offensively. So Hyde really fits that mold of being that sledgehammer up the middle. The only question I have is with San Francisco's quarterback liking to dump the ball off sometimes. Can he catch the ball at an NFL level? That's my only question that I have about Hyde. It's not that he didn't catch any passes in college, but that wasn't his strength. But if you're looking for that bowling ball to shove up the middle, that's your guy.
New Orleans Saints up next. They went with wide receiver Brandon Cooks out of Oregon State. They now turn their attention to a pretty woeful defense, although they played much better last season, but still in the back half of the league, I would think, defensively. Stanley Jean-Baptiste out of Nebraska, pretty rough cornerback. He's only played cornerback for 2.5 years, and I've heard some brutal reports on him in his coverage skills.
Well, 2 things. First of all, with a name like Stanley Jean-Baptiste, is there really any place else he could have gone besides New Orleans, right? So he'll fit into the French Quarter if nowhere else. But the thing that made him sort of stand out is in this copycat league, everybody's trying to find the next tall cornerback and make it work. And Jean-Baptiste is the next hopeful project in that regard. He's 6'3", and he's physical, and he has a wide receiver background. The question is, what's he going to translate to? You just roll the dice and you hope. I usually don't take a second-round pick on such a project, but New Orleans must feel good about it.
He is a project, and from what I understand, did not look good in Senior Bowl workouts when he was lining up against wide receivers who, of course, are going to be his contemporaries in the NFL. Now we move on to the 59th pick, Indianapolis Colts. Get into the mix now with Jack Mewhort out of Ohio State, who's played tackle, projects to possibly a guard because of the lack of athleticism in the NFL. Here's a kid who, yes, he's going to stick in the NFL if he was taken in the first 60 picks, but I am not impressed with him. I just don't think he's that athletic. Again, I think he's going to struggle if he's forced to play tackle. I think he's a guard in this league. He's too high. He was overwhelmed by superior pass rushers. Remember, Ohio State opened up last season against Khalil Mack in Buffalo. Mack made him look horrible. Mack made at times that entire offensive line for Ohio State, as Buffalo actually stayed in that game within a touchdown into the fourth quarter, much because of Khalil Mack making plays in the Ohio State backfield. And Muhort also looked bad in the end of the season when Ohio State's schedule got much tougher against Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game and facing that speed on carpet, and against Clemson in the Orange Bowl as well. All right, at pick 60, we've got the Carolina Panthers going with Missouri defensive end Kony Ealy.
Well, Michael Sam's the guy getting all the publicity and all the headlines out of Missouri, but Kony Ealy was probably actually the better defender there this year. I like him as a player. I think it's a great value in the second round. The only question I have is, the Panthers, do they really need another edge rusher on that team when they have so many other needs? That's my only question about this particular pick.
Jacksonville at 61, really targeting the passing game with Blake Bortles and Marquise Lee. And now at pick number 61, they go to Penn State and Allen Robinson, who was an extremely impressive receiver. He was first team All-Big Ten, no question, and my concessions to Jared Abbrederis, but I would say the best receiver in the Big Ten over the last 2 years in regards to making big plays downfield, does not have elite speed, and I just question him coming out after his junior season. Yes, he's going to get paid. Yes, especially with that team, is going to be needed to play right away, but he could have stuck around for one more year with a very strong quarterbacking situation and Christian Hackenberg there at Penn State, but he comes out after 3 years. And your thoughts on Robinson?
Well, first of all, I really, really like what Jacksonville has done strategy-wise in this draft. Whether you question the Bortles pick at number 3 or not, they then went and got him 2 receivers that are very complementary. Marquise Lee might be that smaller, shiftier yard-after-catch guy. Allen Robinson, while he has some yard-after-catch ability, he is the big guy. He's your big physical receiver, and I really like to pick a lot from that standpoint, from a strategy standpoint. But I like Allen Robinson also from the tape that I watched on him. He's very. I watched a particular play that he had against this team from Ohio State, where he went left and then he went right and made a full U-turn on the field and scored a touchdown on him. And he's got a little bit more to him than just muscle.
I think those Buckeye defenders were probably a bit just taking it easy on Penn State. We'll take into consideration the final score was 63-14 in that game. All right, let's get to the next pick here with the New England Patriots. My daughter was on the couch with me watching the NFL draft, and sometimes the truths that hit home are the simplest, Brent. And she responded when New England took Jimmy Garoppolo out of Eastern Illinois. She said, "Why is New England taking a quarterback?"
So she already knew that they had a capable backup in Ryan Mallett.
Well, of course, she was thinking, yeah, she was going down the depth chart.
Well, yeah, the run on quarterbacks hasn't really kicked off as strongly here in the second round as I thought it would. Jimmy Garoppolo was a guy who I thought would be the tail end Charlie of that second round run on quarterbacks. Obviously, Bill Belichick sees something in him that he likes. And it does call into question, what is the future of Ryan Mallett then? But Garoppolo is a guy that opened up a lot of eyes in this post-college bowl game season, and especially at the Senior Bowl. He went there on the heels of an East-West Shrine game appearance, and in both cases, the scouts really liked what they saw.
And I'm sure if we scoured NFL scouting reports, we would find the term tail end Charlie in describing Jimmy Garoppolo. Sure, it would be there somewhere, right? All right, let's go with the Dolphins at 63. And we've got Jarvis Landry, player I really like, a player that I think if he could run faster without the pads on, in the combine, in the controlled setting, which we will never see again in his career, he would be, who knows, a top 15 or 20 pick.
Yeah, I just don't know. A second-round guy, second-round pick on a guy who can't break 4.7 as a wide receiver. All apologies to Anquan Bolden that might be due. I probably thought Landry was a late third-round value on my particular board. Sure, he's got great hands. Sure, he's fearless. Sure, he has just a physicality about him that a lot of receivers don't. But pardon the pun, you can't run away from a 4.7 time.
And then to close out the second round, we've got the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks taking offensive tackle Justin Britt out of Mizzou. Of course, the Tigers, with one of the great turnarounds in college football in recent times, going from 2-6 in the SEC all the way to the SEC championship game in winning 7 of 8 games in that conference and finishing in the top 10 in college football. And Britt versus D Ford was an interesting matchup in that SEC championship game, and I think both guys won their share of battles in that Britt versus D Ford matchup that came to a head a number of times in that game, with Missouri scoring 42 points. So Britt gave James Franklin enough time to throw, enough times to put up that number of points. All right, Brent, we're through 2 rounds of this NFL Draft 2014. We appreciate you jumping on board because I just struggled on through last night to do my very best without you, but we're glad to have you back.
All righty. Well, look, the things are just starting to heat up now, so I'm looking forward to getting back with you.